I just wanted to take a moment to preface this episode with a disclaimer out of respect for anyone mentioned in my story. What I discuss with Matt and Ashleigh is a candid conversation based on my personal experience, opinions, and feelings. I mean, absolutely no disrespect for anyone else involved. Honestly, I have a great deal of love for the entire family and for each group of people that have touched my life throughout this experience. Thank you for listening.
The World Tomorrow. The Worldwide Church of God presents Herbert W. Armstrong.
And I'm here to bring you the truth, because you don't hear this from any other voice. No one else is telling you the things that God is telling you through me. He's speaking through me.
We must not judge what God is most surely doing. Right now, there are no coincidences. Everything has a meaning and is an opportunity to learn to be faithful by being obedient even when it's uncomfortable.
Those of you that have not surrendered to God to really be obedient to Him, you don't agree very far with me, do you? Of course you don't. You can't. You're carnal-minded. And the carnal mind is enmity against God. The carnal mind is hostile toward God.
The Lord let me experience what it is to be a new bride. You know, I'm not worried about what I'm about to say, though it may be graphic. We're coming to the Lord, and if you can take it, beyond the veil is the chamber. That's the wedding chamber. The Lord told me that.
Welcome back to the Cult Next Door podcast. I'm Mattie, Lasiter, and as always, I'm joined by my sister, Ashleigh Teeter. And today we are joined by our brother-in-law, Blake Moore.
Hey, Blake. It's good to have you.
Thankful to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I've been looking forward to having you on for a long time because I know that you have kind of a unique perspective on being in the Crusade Church, having come from a Worldwide Church of God background, like Mattie and I, or really me, right? Yeah. And so I think I wanted to kind of start out by asking you a little bit about your background in the Worldwide Church of God, and we can maybe just start there and then go into how you ended up in the Crusade Church. Yeah.
And then out of it.
Yeah. And then out of it.
Yeah, sure. So I was, I guess, technically raised in it, born in it. I think my parents, both of their parents found Mr. Armstrong fairly early on in their childhood or midway through it. Like, I don't know if they were 10 or 12 or 15 or something, but I'm pretty sure they were at least preteen or younger. So they were raised-ish in it with varying degrees of commitment on their parents' sake. Honestly, that's a little bit fuzzy for me. But they met, like, if I'm not mistaken, at a feast at a YOU event. I can't remember what YOU stands for.
Youth Opportunities United.
Hooking up singles in the faith, right? Like, that's what it is, right? Like, because that's such a big part of it all.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think it was a matter of building that community to keep the young people engaged in the church and then turn them into members. And part of that was meeting people of the opposite sex. And then you're creating these couples and then families. And I think it was, created to grow the church.
The whole thing sounded like a blast when I was a kid because we didn't have a YOU by the time, like, I'm hitting that age, right?
Okay.
Because that's the point is, like, so I think they met around like 16, 17, something like that, YOU feast site, and then married, the whole thing. Like, so I'm born into it. And then I believe I was about, like, so I remember, you and Sarah will talk about being on the pallet in between the chairs in a church service, like having your colors and your toys and being quiet.
Silent.
Right? Yeah, silent. But that's about as much as I remember. I remember playing in the back in between services with a couple of kids my age, but very hazy because I think I was about 5 6, maybe, when the church started apostatizing.
So
right?
that was like in the 1993-ish or something.
Somewhere in that neighborhood. Stuff was changing enough within the church. I can't remember. I guess it's long after Armstrong died, but his son, when the power change happened.
Yeah.
I don't care to
He
get
died in 1986 or 8.
Okay, so
I
it's
don't
after
remember.
that,
And then Joseph W. Tkach took over the church, and they started moving it mainstream, and that all happened in the early 90s.
And that was kind of a gradual process.
Yeah.
Mainstreaming, right? Like going from Saturday to Sunday, holidays, the whole thing. And so church is apostatizing, right? And so faithful core, people leave in splinter groups. So I think I'm like 5 when that happens.
Okay.
And if I'm not mistaken, there's a 5 or 6 year period, maybe 4, but somewhere in that neighborhood of kind of no man's land for my parents, where I don't guess we're going anywhere for a while. And then I think we're trying out like a Baptist church for 6 months or a year on Sunday, maybe a couple years. Like, I don't have a ton of memory of like core foundation there with what exactly we were doing. I think it was a little bit, it's funny because it's weird like how your childhood is memories are in bits and pieces. So I don't remember not doing anything like keeping the Sabbath, because then like by 10, 11 years old or so, we're joining a worldwide offshoot, right? So not quite the same intensity as worldwide, but
it was still like they are carrying on the
very
faith
similar.
and the truth, right?
The same faith in so many ways, right? Very similar.
Same structure of services.
Same
generally.
structure,
Yeah.
same core beliefs. It was getting better and evolving. Like the pastor that it was under, I still respect the man greatly. Like I love him. I think he's a genuine, like, great guy. And like, I think he's admirable in a lot of ways. So I think he was kind of intent on moving to, so stuff that he saw wrong with worldwide, he was intent on correcting, but they were I don't know, we could,
but the doctrine,
the core doctrine, like,
yeah,
there's probably a
the
bit less
tenets were the
focus
same.
on, there's a bit less focus on, only a little bit. I was going to say a bit less focused on like prophecy and end time stuff. And then I'm like, well, not as screaming oriented as like you'll hear clips of Armstrong, right? So
yeah,
I don't have recollection of hearing that in person. But for me, kind of the biggest takeaway is the philosophy, the belief system, and a lot of the negative repercussions of it still really lace like how I was raised. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way, especially not towards my parents at all, because I don't look on it as, I don't feel like I was raised in an abusive environment in any way, shape, or form, right? Like, so that part of my story is very different from the angle you guys have to come from, unfortunately. But my parents had a hard childhood and with their households, right? And I won't go any further than that for, sake of their privacy. Because honestly, a lot of it wasn't really discussed with me openly for a long time. Like I had to piece stuff together way after the fact. So like after doing a bit of therapy, like I'm aware now of how, like, it's not necessarily just straight up abuse that forms you with certain defense mechanisms or these things. Some of it is you're picking up by proxy. Like if you're raised by someone with a certain defense mechanism because they were abused, maybe, right? Mm-hmm. Like you can start to live your life that way just by the imprinting. Like it's taught to you as this is the way to be, right? So there's things like...
It's also epigenetics.
Which is a huge thing,
yeah,
right? Like I've only scratched the surface of looking at that. But yeah, I mean, that's a big deal. Like there's things like...
Trauma can change gene expression and then that can be passed on to children.
You listen to Gabor Mate talk about like what's happening to you in the womb because of your mom's stress hormones. Like some of this stuff, like what's being passed on, it's crazy. So like, and you listen to him, right? If anyone wants to check him out, I highly recommend it if you're interested in trauma and the whole thing. But it's not about blaming. Like you're not like blaming so-and-so for this or so-and-so for that. It's like, this just is what is. Like this is how things form, and we only understand this much of it maybe. So the Worldwide Church of God heavily influences my entire childhood, whether or not there was a couple year break, and then the offshoot, like so much of the thought process and patterns, and like it took me up until, a couple years ago to realize, like, wait a minute, the whole thing's a cult. Right. And it's still huge for me to this day, working through, well, what part of it's good, what part of it's bad. Like, is all of Christianity a cult? Like, I had to go back and like I experienced the complete crisis of identity and faith, where it's like, I don't know if I can believe in God anymore. Like, I don't know if that part is true, like all the way down to the base level. I had to reprove that for myself. Like, what do I really believe? And that process is still happening now. I can't, for nothing that I have in my background, biblically speaking, childhood wise, all the way through, none of it held up for me at the end of it all. Like, when you get down to like, who am I? Like, what do I really believe? Like, what am I really founded on? I had to like go back to a foundation of the rational logic behind apologetics, like certain things where I was like, I cannot see a better explanation or alternative for the universe, like scientifically, like another religion. Like, so I still believe in God, and I'm still to this day, I would use the word tormented maybe, although that's a bit dramatic, but like, it's very hard to figure out then. If you don't throw it all out the window, which I get, like I have absolutely no criticism for anyone that does, because like I get that feeling like all this is bad. So much bad was done in the name of something that's supposed to be good. How do you count on any goodness there? Like, that's really hard. And I don't think anybody's got a perfect answer for a lot of those questions. But if you don't throw it all out the window, the deconstruction and then reconstruction to what can I believe? What do I believe? Like, just to be really vulnerable and raw, it's like, I think it's going to be a long time before.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe it's always evolving, right?
Right.
Like we were talking before we started, like, well, what is truth? Like that's deep stuff, which we don't have to dive into today, but there's my gist of a background.
No, but I do hope that you're patient with yourself, in that,
Yeah.
like, for a long time, I felt like I needed to know. Like, I have to know right now.
You want to, because it feels terrible not to know.
Yeah.
Like, there's this level of, well, that's something I've done away with, is like this, to a large extent, this level of black and white viewing of the world. It's like, that was the only way to view the world, was black and white. There was no such thing as gray area. And now I'm like, there's a hell of a lot of gray area for me. I feel like what I believe, like biblically now, is very distilled to a core couple of things where I'm like, once you get beyond this, I'm like, I'm not going to argue with anybody. I can have like a fun, like healthy conversation. I like debate. Like, I can have a fun conversation, but like, I'm not going to think ill of you for thinking different than me. And then I hope that's the thing, is like, we had no mutual like respect and real love for like a differing opinion. Right?
No.
Like, we were so, and worldwide, all the way through to offshoots, to Crusade Church, any cult, right? And which is the tough thing for me, like fleshing out like Christianity, like as a thing itself, or any like religion, like you name it. Like, I don't like religion at all now. I don't want to be a part of a group. Like, I miss community and fellowship and like intimate connection with.
There are a lot of ways
people
to find that,
but
though.
finding it is hard.
Yeah. But
especially when that's
it's
part
not
of my,
only found within a religious construct.
Not. No,
you
but
know?
here's the thing. When you've been raised to where that is it.
That's it, yeah.
It presents you to the world, you hit your mid-30s and you're like, oh,
yeah.
I'm trying to reform my life here with a serious dysfunction on social ability.
Yeah.
Like on.
Well, because in the church, you don't actually have to build, right? Because it is already built in for you, and you
It
are
has to
friends
be.
with these people because these people are the people who think like you, and you're all a part of this elite group.
And
so
you're
it's-
heavily discouraged from getting that anywhere else.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I was
And
just going to say, like, it was frowned upon to have friends that were outside of the church, at least close friends. Like, acquaintances is one thing, but if you're like spending a lot of time with somebody
That's a
and they're
problem.
not in the church, it's like, okay, what are you not doing?
Yeah.
that
Like,
they're
you
not
should be
coming in?
evangelizing them,
Yes.
getting them in, or
Yeah.
they're like a terror. Like, they're going to pull you
Exactly.
to hell.
Like,
right?
they should either start coming to church and believe like you, or they're influencing you, and that's not good.
Which
so,
there are things like that you can understand from a principle's sake. But then you
Yes.
take any point, which is a huge problem. You take any point to an extreme, and then now we've got some dysfunction here. Like, now we've got a problem. And so it sounds lame, but then like as an adult, it's like you've gone through divorce that's been your entire life, like socially, right? And then now you have to learn how to date, right? So apply that to like friendship, because it's weird. It's like, so then how do you go? Like, I don't know.
you
like-
walk up to somebody, hey, you want to be friends?
It's
It is
what are you supposed
hard
do?
to make
It's
friends
weird.
as an adult person.
It's weird. Like, I've literally spent therapy sessions talking about this. Like, you know, it sounds really lame, like, to admit out loud, but it is just what it is. Like, especially when the level of pain and trauma reaches X level where your instinct is to withdraw.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that feels bad and you don't want to do it. Like I'm aware withdrawing feels terrible, but it's also hard to get yourself beyond that and out the door to like go by yourself into this world that you've never really meshed
Well,
with.
that you viewed as scary and not safe, because it always was us against the world. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what we called it.
Yeah.
The world believes this way. The world thinks that.
And then there's just the
And now you're in it.
And then there's just the practical level of just out of thin air, like you just go make friendships with
Right,
people.
right.
And I run my own business, like cutting grass, like on customers. It's not like I'm in an office place. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not like interacting with people all day, and I'm not going to another church right now. And the best thing I've got going for me is trying, for her sake, getting Elise involved in things, because
Yeah.
she needs social interaction, and we homeschool her, and meeting other parents.
Yeah.
Like, that's been like anyway, that's kind of a digression, but I don't know where we've rabbit trailed from there.
You're just kind of talking about, the offshoot that you kind of grew up in, kind of being worldwide light in a lot of ways. Like,
yeah, like the whole mentality, the theology, and to highlight, what this podcast is kind of about, right? Like the negative repercussions of it all, like those things are kind of core tenets to my formative years and entire life. Yeah.
So then kind of fast forwarding, I guess it would have been 2006.
Yep.
So I think I've probably heard this before, but you and your family and a few others from the church in Alabama, you guys heard about our feast site in Arkansas.
Lonnie
and came.
Finley introduced
Okay.
the pastor in
Was
Montgomery.
that the first time you guys heard about like Crusade,
Yep.
just period? Okay.
As far as I know.
Yeah, kind of talk about like what you remember about hearing about the feast, and then about us, and like what did you think you guys were coming into when you came visited for the feast, like that kind of experience.
Yeah. So my childhood, like my perspective on it now is different than it was in 2006, right? So I'm not viewing the church as a bad thing. Worldwide Church of God, any of that. Like, we're keeping the feasts. And I'm viewing it from a teenager's perspective so speaking to the social aspect, so Worldwide Church of God, like that's for what that was is gone by the time like preteen years type of thing. I'm in a offshoot with a handful of elderly people and the pastor's kids, who just happen to have 6 children and adopted 3. So he's got 9 kids. Like, that is my social world. Also, I'm put in their Christian school, which has their children from 6th grade to graduation. I remember being like really shy in elementary school and having a hard time like socially, and then entering at 6th grade that church school, Worldwide Church of God, essentially church school. And it's not to paint everything in a negative light, because there's pros and cons of going to a mainstream public school these days, right? So, I mean, I can see the positive perspective of it, but at the same time, I can also see all of the things it's made difficult for me. So that didn't do me a lot of favors in learning to like build friendships outside the church, right? Like interact socially, like things I'm struggling with now. It's like, I didn't have a great footing for that, you know? And so then that's my school. And then the pastor's kids, and, you know, their experience is similar to mine and then more intense in some ways. So like, we're kind of in the same boat. And so then my perspective on what I'm getting at is on coming to the feast, like the church is like, okay, the church is boring and dry. But what I was really getting at here is like, I'm desperate socially. And like, I remember from being an early teen, I think you and I used to talk about this, is that like, really want to be married, right? Like for me, and that's more than just like a physical thing for like a teen boy for me. Like that's going back to like, honestly, just craving intimacy and closeness with someone. And in the church, it's like, you're going to marry in the faith. And you're like, how the heck are you ever gonna find that? I remember praying as a kid, right? That like, you have to pray for God to prepare the person for you and send them to you. Oh,
and the faith is not Christianity.
No, it's no. It's Sabbath keeping, holiday keeping, right?
It's very
Christianity's
small.
all going to hell. Like Sunday keepers, like
right? Exactly.
They don't got the truth.
Yeah.
So I remember like being intensely concerned and praying. It's like, God, prepare somebody for me. But like, I would really like it if the girl that has to be in the faith is also pretty. You know, it's like, if she's just got to be in the faith and we got to find somebody, then, you know, yeah, that's great. So that's a big perspective, right? On coming to because in Worldwide, coming to the feast was, as a, you know, teenager, you're like, yeah, this is your chance to meet other people in the faith that you can marry. And then the church is dry and it's a bunch of elderly people and it's boring. You know, like as a teenager, you want to listen to rock and roll. Also, you're in an environment where this is different from y'all's background, right? With your dad, rock organist. Organist, is that the term?
Yeah.
Pianist. Rock music. So I'm coming from a household and church environment where I literally heard it preached that, no, these chords, that sound, forget the lyrics, like that's demonic. Mm-hmm. But I'm wanting to rebel a little bit and listen to my rock and roll music. You know, I'm getting heavily into Christian rock.
Yeah. E minor power chord? No.
Oh, man. So we walk into the feast. We don't know what to expect. You know, this is like any other feast site we go to. It's at a camp. Like we've done this a bunch of times, just people we've never met. And walk in, you know, on time. Services are starting like 20 minutes late. Let's don't go down that road. That's fun. But, you know, the Worldwide is pretty regimented, but
very.
Lasiter Church.
Lasiter Standard Time.
Lasiter Standard Time is a little bit more loosey-goosey. Everything revolves around Night Owl pastor here that, you know, he'll roll in, get started when we want to. Anyway, we walk in and so like immediately, like it's just a bit livelier than we're used to, you know, and there's like mainstream type worship music, you know, and it's a live band. And so there's some discomfort with this from our background, especially for the older people, you know, that I'm traveling with. But
very much.
So I remember the first couple of days, but then like it's weird. Like people are raising their hands, like this is Protestant and Pentecostal and the whole ball game. But Sabbath keepers, holiday keepers, like they got the truth. So let's walk this out here. And within a couple days, you know, I'm like, yeah, I'm bought into this. Like this version of this faith suits me a whole lot better than and I can't tell you now. But then we're, you know, testifying, describing it as like we encountered like the presence of God here in a very different way, like a completely, like for the first time way, not like in a different way, but like actually encountered it.
Would you say that was directly correlated to the music, like the emotionality
I wonder
of
about
the
it now.
music,
Like,
making you feel.
Sarah and I talk about it all
Yeah.
the time. It's like music is incredibly powerful.
Very.
And you can, you've got like death metal guys whipping crowds into mosh pit frenzies. Like I've been to the concerts, where it's like you set the mood with lighting and emotion, and you've got charisma at the, music's huge. It's very powerful and definitely a huge part of it. And I can't give you an answer right now on what's what when I look back on stuff like that now. I don't know what's real. Like I said, it's easier to say none of it's real. I'm still questioning. I'm still working things out there. But it was very powerful. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't argue with you if you were going to make the case that that's all it was. I wouldn't feel like I have a lot of leg to stand on there. I'm not sure, but my experience then, is like, this is amazing. There were more young people. Not a ton, not really. Like the feast is 30 to 50 people, maybe, give or take. I'm coming from a congregation of about 30. And the difference is it's like out of a 1% youth rate in a congregation of 30, maybe now we're closer to 50-50, give or take. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because, like the Turners, Donald and Tabitha, they're not elderly. Like I'm coming from a place that doesn't have families. It has older married couples and then the pastor's kids and me and my brother.
Right.
Older couples with grown children who
are not in the church, right? They're all praying for them like every Sabbath.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So, so my take is, at first this is weird, but very soon I'm like, this is exciting. This is awesome. And then, like you mentioned before we started, like the sermon's not the traditional dry, like we want to fall asleep as a kid listening, like I'm just dying to get to lunch and get to what we're doing after this. But like it's engaging, powerful, yelling, some cursing from behind the lectern, mildly, but like this is, as a teenager, you're like, man, this is cool.
Was the first time that you ever met Dad,
First
correct?
time, yep.
And what was your impression of him as a person, as a pastor? That first impression.
I don't remember a bunch of specific thoughts about like then, like that first few days, like my impression of him. Well, looking back on it now, if I were going to say something is like, I would give it a little bit of a larger than life type central figure presence to the room. I remember it was before the first service. So I think the first day, like people are setting up camp, right? Somebody from our group that we came up with, like had brought hymnals, Worldwide Church of God hymnals. And it's like, hey, let's kick off, this evening with like some hymns around this pavilion here, and there's a couple people that we don't know joining in. And then your dad comes walking in, like he's pretty tall, super long arms. He's got his hand up, I remember that like out in the air like this and the way his hand looks raised. And I was like, that's weird, but there's this element of, I wouldn't say commanding presence type, but like, it's weird now because now you're viewing it with a lot more information, looking back. Right. But I kind of remember the feeling of like seeing him for the first time and that subconscious, like under the radar type perspective of he's somebody you take note of, I guess, right?
Right, yeah.
A big presence.
Yes, a big presence. It was probably how you would boil that down without all the informed language you would give it after the fact.
You just know when he steps into a room or a space, like.
And it's a presence of authority.
You see, I remember being very curious, like, oh, this is the guy that's like in charge here. Like that's something you kind of care about in general, like who's running the show. I mean, that's just kind of natural.
Okay. So after you got hooked during that feast.
I was baptized at that feast. So like I remember like building on the last great day.
Okay.
Probably still have the certificate with the date on it and everything. I want to say it was like October 26th or 28th. So I remember like, it's like your whole life in the church is building to like, you've got to be baptized with the Holy Spirit to be saved. Yeah. Like you and I were talking about that earlier with the fear of tribulation and your parents getting, rising in the clouds to meet the Lord. Like, I remember being intensely concerned as a young kid, like, well, I'm left behind. I don't have the Holy Spirit yet. Like, I'm not saved. Like, so your whole childhood, but you can't get saved too early. Like, you don't know how serious it is. Except you're terrified about how serious it is.
Yeah.
At 6 years old, I remember this, but you can't take on that responsibility.
Oh, it was a grave decision. I mean, and you were supposed to put a lot of time into it and go to counseling and read certain scriptures about counting the cost.
So it wasn't quite that serious as worldwide by the time I'm getting baptized, but it's still very serious. And you don't do it as a kid.
It still holds the same weight though, right?
Same
like
weight,
if
yes.
you get
we
the
just
Holy
didn't have
Spirit,
like all of the course material that you have to go through essentially, but it was still
But it was said that once you receive the Holy Spirit,
well, then there's no sacrifice for you if you trample that underfoot after, right?
That's right. Like,
did you have like the counseling session before?
Yes.
Yeah, because we would do that. Like, I don't know.
Like,
was it?
I came to talk to my dad, which was nerve wracking. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I was feeling the pull, the draw, God's presence, pulling me in, and then like obviously, then I had to talk to Larry. Pastor here. So like I did that with my dad, or they talked, I don't remember, and then I had to talk to him, but he like very much like deferred to my dad, who's already a speaker in the church, like back home. And there was a lot of deference to him. Like dad seemed to respect him, and your whole life is building to like
marriage.
Yes. And like, you got to have the Holy Spirit. Like, like it's this impending decision that you got to make the decision you're going to make. Unless you're like a really rebellious kid, which I was not, your whole life is just building to, I'm going to be baptized one day when I'm ready.
But did you have that fear of what if I get baptized and then like Satan like attacks me and I fail and I start to fall away? I think that was a common fear.
That came for me later, not pre-baptism.
Okay.
I'm familiar with that fear, but
just part of deciding, do I take this step? Because once I do...
No, I'm sure. I mean, that makes sense. I'm sure, like being in worldwide at a more cognizant age. But for me, like, no, it wasn't that intense by then. I just knew it was a big deal. Like, you're basically raised to do it. Like now, like having kids, it's challenging thinking through like, well, what is it to teach them what you believe is true and right about the world, while not indoctrinating them without removing their ability to critically think, because that matters a lot to me. And I don't think, give it a percentage, 90%, 95%, I don't think most kids are taught how to critically think. I don't think the school system is set up to do it. You're definitely not set up to do it if you're in an intense church/cult. So that's a really tricky skill to me, honestly. Like, how do you... Because I like to think, like I like to debate, I like to process through things, but I wasn't applying it to, is this the truth? Like this version of the faith? Like, of course not. So like you're always building as a kid towards like, I'm going to be baptized when I'm ready. Like when God calls me and I'm mature enough to like blah, blah, blah. And so that happens for me at this feast. Like I'm bought in like so much, like this church has given me all the things that I thought couldn't exist in this faith.
And it was built into, if you are a child of a called member of the church, then you automatically got the calling.
They're holy. Yes, you're holy. Like that's in the scripture.
So you're grandfathered into the cult, into
like
God's family.
That's in the scripture. Was like the unbelieving wife is sanctified by her believing husband, and vice versa, and their children are holy.
Yeah.
Not going to delve into theology there, but no, you're right. Like it's hereditary to some extent. So Crusade Church brings alive for me what I thought was just dry and boring and like a terrible thing to have to be a part of, but it is the truth. So now I'm like, hey, the truth can be better. It can be more exciting and more lively and full of the Spirit. And hey, it can have Pentecostal elements, right? And like, this is better. And feel God's presence. And honestly, I can't, you asked me 5 years ago, I'd have told you, it's like, no, God called me, like it's his presence, like it's that through and through. But now looking on my whole story and delving into the therapy in it, right? I can't disassociate for me how big a deal the social belonging element was, like being a lonely, depressed teenager in a church that's not gonna fulfilled. Like, you're never going to get married in this church, and you're not going to have a group of friends. You're not going out to the movies with anybody like that. It doesn't exist for you. I cannot disassociate that now from the other things that, like, I don't know if it's 60-40, 50-50, but it's huge 2 elements, right? Of buying in and then getting baptized, and then ultimately 2.5 years later deciding to move.
And that's what I would like to get into is when you left that feast, you went back home to Alabama and
then devoured all of the online content.
Okay. Because they were live streaming, right? Crusade was live streaming every week.
I was mostly listening to pre-recorded stuff on the website. It
I
wasn't
don't think
quite
we were
up,
doing it.
It wasn't
at
quite
that
up
time,
to, no.
Yeah.
It was
I'm saying
just
live,
yeah. There was a lot of pre-recorded audio. Hardly, you had just started posting on the website some videos, but 90% or more of the content was audio sermons and booklets. So I read all of those. Really dive deep into pursuing God's presence. Like, that was like your dad's kind of number one, like, talking point, honestly. Like, for him, it was almost old hat. Sabbath, holy day, stuff you would hear talked about in worldwide, like, this is the faith, this is the truth. Like Armstrong, like, you're hearing God's truth from me now.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he was kind of evolved past all that. Like, that was a given.
Yeah.
But we're better
Right.
than every other worldwide church because we also pursue the things of the Spirit. It was a new black and white point to stand on that I picked up the standard and was like, waved some serious, ashamedly, condemnation over the church I was leaving. Even my parents to some extent at some point, like, I'm not glad about that.
Well, I was going to say, like,
that now, but
you and I during that feast hit it off, and my recollection of that time between the feast and when you moved was that after coming to the feast and experiencing the way that Crusade, especially like the music and stuff, that you were just so like,
it was a done deal.
over it with the church there. And I remember like you and maybe some others that had visited that kind of were like, yes, what they're doing, we want to do that. And there was so much resistance at the church that you were like, well, they're never going to take it on because they're, bless their hearts, they're a bunch of 70-year-old people that they like worldwide. They don't like this.
They've been indoctrinated to believe that is Pentecostal, that it's not God's way of conducting a Sabbath service.
And don't you dare tell us that, like, we have to or we better. Like, there was some serious friction over there. And that tells a lot of the story, which is probably not worth all of the time of getting into. But if, like, my first couple early, like, baby Christian years was like towing that line, it's like I bought in so hard, and like I searched the website for the sermons that were about God's presence and worship, because like that was the pivotal thing for me.
And didn't you guys like try to do like a Friday night type praise thing there? And it like,
so that's the thing, is like, I'm a fiery new Christian now, and like it's about God's presence. Like, we've already got the Sabbath and the holy days, like we've been doing that, but like, yes, we need to be worshiping and expressing that worship, and it's in the Bible and all of this. And there's a bunch of resistance about it, and like we tried to do it, and like at some point, you know, you're impatient as a kid, and you're already so quickly, because the foundation's there from worldwide, right? Black and white, we're right, everyone else is wrong. You've already got that mentality. So all you do is level it up.
Add a new thing.
It's like, okay, these guys are right about this, and they've already got the other stuff that we were right about. They're just even better, and you guys don't love the Lord. Like, that was literally, you probably remember that.
Oh yeah, I was going to say our correspondence during that time, I just remember you being so frustrated with the people who were there that were like, why can't you guys see this the way that I see it? How good.
It's like, you guys talk about loving God and the truth. It's like, don't you see this part of the truth? And like, he says, if you love me, like, you'll worship me, like with clapping hands and cymbals, and like read the Psalms.
But the reason why that was so appealing is because it was a feeling.
Yeah.
And feelings are so powerful. So I think
was against feelings.
Yeah.
But your dad wasn't.
Right. And I think that you are pursuing the way that made you feel. And it was, I mean, so much can be created. So much feeling and emotionality can be created by atmosphere.
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't want,
well, we tried to recreate the same atmosphere with a Friday night service. Like, it was the dim light with some candles, and, you know,
Well, also, like, have you ever been to a concert
Yes,
of like
100%.
a band you really love,
Yes.
and you're just in the moment and
Yep.
you're feeling the music,
That's a
like
unique-
physically feeling the beat, and
That's a unique
you're with
experience.
all these people who also love this band too, and you know the song, the lyrics, and
Yep.
you're just in the moment, and it is almost like a spiritual experience.
There are very few things in life, I think, that do that like that.
Right.
Like, I think that's pretty unique. 100%. Yeah.
So why wouldn't you want that again?
Of
like
course.
if you
I was
went and
desperate for
spent 8 days having that, and
Ultimately, it boiled down to, if I'm going to be here, like still in this church, like we're going to have that.
You're
Not
right.
like
yeah,
that, like my way or the highway. I mean, I'm a kid,
Mm-hmm.
but like, no, I mean, like, I'm passionate now about this version of the truth. And ultimately, like, the thought process is, if you don't accept this, and you don't actually love God, like that's, I mean, you can trace that all the way through worldwide, whole childhood, right? Like,
it's binary always.
it is, it's black and white. Like, this is the only way. No one else gets it. No one else is right. I remember thinking, like, that's what was one of the hardest things for me to reconcile as a kid. And the church is like, wait a minute. You're telling me that every other church, just because they're in there on Sunday, they're going to hell? And the answer was never like, oh yeah. It was like, well, most of them probably don't know yet. And when God reveals it to them, then they'll be saved. And those that do know, that are like choosing, then yeah, you're right. They're going to hell. That was essentially,
But the people who don't know are going to have to suffer unimaginable things.
you guys touched on that last week,
Yeah.
right? We could go. Where are we going here?
Yeah,
I don't know.
cut this part out,
Pick
because
your-
let's not go back to
Pick
that.
your path.
So we kind of have
Although
touched.
the fact that we share some of those same things is really interesting.
We've kind of already touched on the obvious next step, but you're back home in your home church, frustrated, years of frustration. Like you and I are talking about this, through letters and emails or whatever else, about everything that you're trying to do. You and a small core group of people that were
One or two.
Yeah, very small. So I guess the next thing that we would talk about is, your decision to move. Like, what made you decide to go ahead and make a move away from your home church, your family, like all of that? It's a big question, but
Yeah. So, man, I feel like to some extent, looking back, like it's almost kind of like it was a done deal from the get-go. But that wasn't entirely true. In that moment then, like, I don't know. But yeah, I wouldn't say that that's actually true, because there was a solid year, maybe more, like you said, like we were trying to get the same thing going. Like, I remember us referencing it like, oh yeah, we touched the fire of the Lord, like his presence here, and like that's going to spread, like it should multiply. And that's what we expected, me and a couple others. But it didn't. So ultimately there was a lot of frustration that kind of culminated there. Honestly, I never thought this, but I guess you can't rule it out as partly true, at least as a factor, that I was kind of following the lead of like a deacon type elder, the church that felt exactly the same as me, and kind of hit like a breaking point for him. Like he was involved in the leadership, and he was like, this isn't being received. Like, I kind of have to wash my hands of it and go where God's really valued and loved, right? It's like a mentor to me in a lot of ways at the time. And more importantly, my only real social connection and friend. Like, I'm telling you, like, it took me a long time until very recently to figure out, only in a therapy session, that's like, wait a minute, you've struggled with depression for a long time and you were really lonely as a teenager. And like, it kind of hits you like a light bulb. You're like, yeah, like that's driving under the surface, like a lot of decisions. And he was like my outlet, like my one close connection, friend, like you name it, like lifeline, social lifeline, right? Kind of strangely so, because 20 years my senior, but literally my friends were always older than me. Like any friend I ever had was at least a few years older than me. Like I was always kind of running with a crowd above my age group. And he hit the breaking point, counseling with the pastor there, where it was like, I've got to move on. and being called somewhere else, prayed about it heavily, and then is moving. I was mad at him, so mad. I knew it was right, like it wasn't wrong, but like I hated it, and I couldn't yet. Like too afraid to leave home, still a little too young and whatnot. But very
17?
quickly, yep,
Yeah.
very quickly thereafter, you and I were corresponding a lot, and like the more talking to you and praying about it, and I don't know. I honestly don't remember a lot of the specifics really, but I just remember reaching the conclusion that's like, well, this is what God's doing with my life too. Like that's where I'm supposed to be. Like in my life, well, because I dropped out of college, like because of apocalyptic end time, tribulation type stuff. It's like the point of your life is not to be pursuing a career, or you shouldn't be really thinking about a family and getting married. Like these are all fleshly desires that are a little bit worldly, not wrong, but yeah, they're worldly and not the main thing. And I remember having to talk to my college counselor and explaining to them that I'm being called into the ministry, which, you're not going to seminary, or you're not automatically becoming an evangelist or something, but no, I'm being like, this is your life's purpose. Like it's about the faith, and you're giving up everything else. I remember dropping out of college and them telling me, I remember the look on their face, like how crazy they thought I was, and trying to talk me out of it. But I remember thinking, they don't know. They're just part of the world.
That's right. That's always the fallback.
I'm absolutely right here, and like, too bad. Sorry for you. You don't understand the important things in life here. I don't know not begrudging it, moaning about it now, but how differently does your life turn out if you don't drop out of college pursuing it? Like I wanted to be a lawyer, I think I would have really enjoyed that. A couple of other things. It's not actually what I was studying, but yeah, you're not pursuing a career or any of this other stuff. Like you're going into the ministry, and this is the right one. Like this is where God's actually operating. Because it wasn't just worship and presence of God and music. Like it was also, we're doing something, we're evangelizing. And I'm like, what are we doing? Like that was a big deal to us. It was like, wait a minute, we've done nothing. Like the worldwide thing, and we were still operating under this, is God's called you. You've made it through the entry into the fold here. You're being discipled, and we're all gathering with a potluck every Saturday and hearing the truth, but we're not sharing it with anybody, So that was a factor to me. Like this is what you're supposed to be doing. So you're baptized. If you want to do right, then you're going to go be a part of that. Like that's your only real option.
Yeah, Crusade is going door to door with booklets that we've made, and like setting up at the courthouse parking lot and the courthouse steps.
Yep.
And giving out tracts to people stopped in traffic. Like
yeah, it was major. That was a huge part of it.
I guess at that point we're also doing tent meetings. Like
I came to the first tent meeting before I moved. So that was between 06 and 08. Like
so I remember, that probably was a factor too for you then.
It was, yeah. Like that was what was kind of driving the nail in the coffin, right? Was like, I'm coming up and hanging out with you and Michael and Mikey D and
we got
John,
music,
setting up the tent,
we got people,
and like
we're active,
forming peer relationships with other guys in the church. There's a couple girls around,
Yeah, like at what point did you decide, okay, I'm making the move, and how old were you?
17 and a half.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he moved 6 months before me. So somewhere in there, it's like I didn't like technically decide like he's doing it, I'm doing it. Like that was never happening, but it was very close, right? Like there was a period of me really praying about it and
just one more reason to go too.
Right. It was kind of the nail in the coffin. Like it's kind of hard to decide not to at that point, but it's also very, very hard to do because I'm 17 and a half making this decision. Always been a super responsible kid, but I'm working for my mom and dad's company. I'm living with them. And in my head, I see myself living with them till I'm like 25, saving, building my own house debt-free, like on their property. They got 40 acres, like that's kind of my thought process for life. Dropped out of college. like, so, I don't really know what I'm doing career-wise, but that's kind of how I'm leaning. And whole other aspect to the story, but, diving through your emotional health and upbringing professionally, you come across things like enmeshment, and you kind of can look back and realize, like, wait a minute, like some of this separation anxiety, attachment stuff that you're struggling with, that wasn't quite normal or healthy. There was some enmeshment there. So long story short, very difficult. Even though I wanted to do it, I felt like I was called to do it, to make the decision to leave home. I was ready to leave the church for the better church, but leaving home was tough. I always said I was never the rebellious kid, like dying to get away from my parents, like be independent. Like my parents gave me a lot of independence. I was responsible, mature, like I was trusted. Did a tiny bit of teenage rebellion, like very small, like nothing major. It basically involved like hanging out with people that were rebelling a little bit more intensely, like sleeping around and cutting school a time or two and going to the movies and cussing a tiny bit and listening to rock music. Like that was my teenage rebellion. Okay. For like a year. And then I'm saved in 2006. Right. Oh yeah, very difficult to leave home. I've made a decision I want to leave the church, but leaving home is tough. So it takes me about 6 months of like really coming to that conclusion that this is what I'm called to do. This is the right thing, to be strongly convicted about it, to do it. So then I spend, 6 months saving, and then, I'm leaving home, working for mom and dad's company. I've never had to go out in the real workforce and all of that. But like, I'm just jumping in. I don't give my parents a chance. And to this day, like, I'm incredibly regretful of the way a lot of the things went over this past, but like I hurt them, like leaving, and I didn't counsel with them about it or like give them I'm doing it. Not like in a finger to you type of way, but like, no, this is right. This is what I have to do. Like the guy that's like going to fight for his country type of a thing. It's like, no, I'm going to join up. And you're convicted about it and you're going for it. And for me, it was so challenging and emotional. I could not talk to anyone about it aside from you and David, that I'm doing it, because any emotion leaning the other way was going to break me and I wasn't going to be able to follow through. So I just did it. Saved $3,000 and I did it. And what it was like showing up there and moving. Was it what I expected? I think you asked me something to that effect. It was like, no, like I expected to feel, I don't know, a little bit, not like I'm great, but like a little bit more included, like
celebratory.
Yeah, it was like, he's here now. And then I was just dealing with kind of the emotional hell of that. And then like for the first time in my life, like job hunting crappy jobs, like to get by, and like all of that it was a tumultuous time of life emotionally, but then you just kind of like fall in to line and you are thankful and excited to be there for the Sabbath services and like a part of the group, and you love everybody. Like you form these connections like through the feast and the social bonding and that sort of thing. So it feels great on that hand, but on one respect, but no, it didn't feel quite like I expected. And then once it feels just a little bit normal, you lose some of the magic of the feast. Like the feast is just special. And so then it becomes a little bit more normal, and then you kind of morph into, I don't know, some of the difficult parts of it once the newness wears off, I guess. Yeah, it was and it wasn't. Like I don't think I could have prepared myself for how hard it was. Just like that stage in my life, like you're leaving home. I'm not leaving home, going to a college dorm and having the time of my life hanging out with, frat buddies. Like, no, I've moved states away and, I'm kind of thrust into the world, like job hunting and scraping by and figuring out what it is to like live on peanut butter and jelly instead of, what your
mom's cooking.
Yeah, or we ate out a lot as a kid, and like, you can't afford to go grab McDonald's today because you got to make rent. Like all of that stuff was new, and just the emotional challenge of separating from my family was tough. And I don't think I could have prepared for how tough that was. And then you couple that with, it's not quite as magical fold as the feast is. Just, you live your whole week apart from everybody mostly. Well, yes and no. Like there's a lot of events, a Bible study here and, worship service. But in general, the most of your week is spent at work, right? And in your apartment, it's kind of crappy.
Yeah, the feast is like this special event, and then normal times throughout the year, it's back to reality.
There's such a letdown after the feast.
Oh,
Such
man.
a letdown.
Yeah.
It used
Feast
to be
blues.
Yeah.
It used to be so depressive to me, the feast blues. But then for a bit, it was so exciting that I'd moved. And it's like, well, now I don't have to go back home to dryness. Now I still get to go back home with all these same people. Every Saturday will be like the feast. And it was that way for a while.
Did you also have when the midweek service at that time?
There was a
when you
Tuesday night
first
Bible
moved
study.
there? Okay.
Yes. And Friday night worship service.
Okay.
Sabbath services, 24 hours, Friday night to Saturday night. And then like the highlight of my week then was going to be like Saturday night hangout at the Lasiter lounge, pastor's living room. Everybody's sitting in the floor and piling on the couches, watching his football game, I guess. And
Whatever.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Looking back, I cannot divide the importance and difference between all of those elements and the spiritual side of it and that stuff with the social deprivation, like the depression and loneliness, like in this church and childhood. That was a major part of it.
So when you moved, was it what you expected it to be? That experience that you had at a couple of feasts where it's 8 days, what was it like actually being in that local congregation?
That's a really interesting question, because you know how you said you don't remember things until like you're having the conversation and then boom. Yes and no. Mm-hmm. I remember being surprised at it was really, really hard emotionally separating from my parents. Like it took me years. Honestly, I didn't fully start to get healthy emotionally about separating from my family in Alabama until a couple years into being married, like literally forming that connection. And then Sarah helping me realize wait a minute, this is a little bit why are you so upset about leaving home anytime we visit or whatever? There's a lot at play there. But so it was very hard emotionally, processing that, dealing with that. And I remember feeling no one being as excited about me joining the fold once I was there, and kind of taking me in as the lead up to it. The lead up to it, it's a big deal. Someone's moving here, to join part of our ministry, but then it's oh, you're just here. And I don't mean that in a terrible way, but it didn't feel as special to me. Mm-hmm. I guess I didn't feel as part of the inclusive crowd right away. Honestly, I feel like Matt and I had kind of formed enough of a bond that we were close friends that I would be hanging out a little bit more at the Lasiter Central vibe, but that was before I knew what's going on under the surface there, right? So you're not exactly just bringing anybody on into family dinners with the Lassiters and movie night. That stuff is close. You know what I mean? That stuff's closely guarded. And do you even want to bring anybody into it? Deep down, I don't know. Yeah. But
so that goes into a little bit of our family dynamic,
which is a whole nother.
Which I don't know if you have anything that you want to say about that, Mattie, because some of that existed when I was there, but I think it really intensified after I left.
Which everyone pointed at you over.
What do you mean?
Well, because Ashleigh left and there was this huge divide and hurt, and so many people have turned against us. And so there was this, we're all armoring ourselves. So the Lasiter family became such a close, sorry, I don't want to step on your toe. This is his story to tell, but
no, please.
A close-knit unit is what they called it, right? That we have to protect ourselves from how many people have betrayed us. So that's where all of this enmeshment and toxicity is coming from. But really, it's just a narcissistic cult that has harmed a bunch of other people. So people have turned against you, but you're protecting yourself. Yeah, so a lot of that was your fault. Tongue in cheek.
I do.
There's more to it than that, I think.
I do feel like I was in some ways hesitant to want, or at least early on, to want you around the house, meaning around Dad and his dynamic too much. Because I do.
It's embarrassing, right?
Yes, it is. And
I mean, I get that now. Then I wasn't thinking about it.
There's a weird thing in there, and you guys probably will understand this. Like the way that we wanted, I say we, however you want to put that, the way that we as a collective wanted to portray
The image. Oh man.
yes,
it was
when
big.
when you know that's not going to hold up if somebody
doesn't.
like you is around. I know it's not going to hold up.
Because once you get married and then you're in, then you have to come to family dinners. It's obligatory.
Well, it's like seeing the wizard behind the curtain
Yes.
a little
Because
bit.
that's when you start noticing, well, you noticed those before, like Saturday night hangouts and stuff, but you start seeing it a little bit more intensely, like some of the little red flags that are popping up. You're like, wait a minute, this is odd.
Well, from afar, it's kind of funny in some ways. Like some of the
Right.
things that you
Well,
like.
we chalk it up to these idiosyncrasies that are
Yes.
like you were mentioning before we started, like everybody shut up. I'm taking a phone call. There's 20 other people in the room, but y'all be quiet.
And you just say, "Oh, that's Dad."
Yeah.
It's like,
You just kind of laugh it up. It's like, oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
But deep down, you're like, that was offensive and rude.
yeah, and that was
No one else I
those
know-
type of things.
No
were
one else I
common.
know does that.
No.
Yeah, so many things like that are common.
Yeah.
No, but you're right, because it's not until you marry into the family that the mystique and the facade really falls. And then you're like, wait a minute. I had all of this, what do you call it? I don't know. Grandiosity. This, mystique and like golden family situation, like chalked up to the last. I mean, because every single one of the children is like a narcissistic extension and a leader in the church. Like it's the core cult of the bigger cult. And
The family cult.
it is,
Yeah.
100%.
Oh, yeah.
And
Did you? We'll get. I don't want to jump too far ahead on this part, but like when marrying into it, did you feel stuck at that point? Like after you kind of figured out, and like you said, the facade
I don't think
kind
I
of faded
looked at it
away.
that way.
Okay.
Because I think I was still like intensely committed enough spiritually. Like I'm not really questioning your dad that obvious enough mentally, like even in your own mind.
Also, there's what's called like, I don't know, is it the David argument or the David defense? I'm not sure which, where it's like, King David, he slept with Bathsheba.
Flawed man.
He's
type
flawed, but then,
Oh,
God
yeah.
uses people who are flawed and make mistakes.
100%.
And therefore,
Yes.
we accept a lot out, from the leaders that God has chosen. We're like, you
still don't
dismiss a
question him.
lot of things.
Like we're looking at Moses
Yeah.
with his anger problem,
Right.
but still Miriam questions him and struck with leprosy. So-and-so rebels against him or swallows them up, them and all their families. Like,
And those are
few
used
hundred
as
people.
examples of why.
Control.
Yes. Yeah.
Major.
Yeah.
Like I'm still not completely done untying some of those knots of
Sure.
like, wait a minute, he's wrong. What if he was right? And now
Oh,
like that can
yeah.
still pop up
Oh, I hate
occasionally,
that, yeah.
like it was worse and now it's better and better,
Yeah.
but still like very familiar with that popping up. So no, I didn't feel trapped. I don't think, because I wasn't questioning his fallibility or separation from God's word. Like, I mean, his voice was God's voice. Like he was the one that hears him the closest, right? He's the one with the direct revelation and the super close presence, spiritual connection, and all of that. So I'm still a little bit, under the spell, like wowed by that. So no, I'm noticing red flags, but again, you're chalking them up to, yeah, of course he has some flaws. He's a man.
And at that time, was he already saying that he was receiving prophecies and revelations? Obviously, that all came about when I left, but I don't know at what point he's sharing that with a whole congregation.
So for a long time, so that stuff goes back to 2001.
Okay.
Like 5 years preceding me even showing up at the feast. So that kind of directly
So you went into this knowing this is like
Yep.
God's prophet,
from
basically.
the get-go.
Okay.
So much more impressed with him than what I'm raised with, right?
Gotcha.
Which is sad, to say, because I think my dad's a very admirable man, and I think he's amazing, So like looking back on the time that like I kind of mentally demoted him, for like I hate that now.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's that. But like my dad modeled for me like what I would say like real Christianity, like how you're really supposed to be. Like clearly there's some stuff that I don't agree with, right? Like some of the worldwide perspective, but like at its heart, like now the way I view things is like, well, what's somebody's intention in their heart? Like, so maybe you're wrong. Like we're not going to agree about everything, obviously, but how are you treating people?
Kindness.
What kind of character are you actually modeling, which is one of the things that really blew me away when you talk about seeing the red flags. It's like, I knew there were some major character flaws biblically about what a leader is supposed to have. Like you read the scriptures, like they're being preached.
What were some of those things like in the beginning? What were some of the first red flags that you started to see and take notice of?
I would probably say 3 or 4 things jump to the forefront of my mind when you ask me that. So the being in the middle of a room of people snapping like everyone else shut up, like it's not a joke. It's like, would you guys mind or whatever? It was like command, you better be quiet right now because I'm taking a phone call.
Instead of him leaving the room and respecting the other people in the room.
Like, I won't do that one-on-one with another person.
Right.
Like, if I want to take a phone call, I don't want to just talk in front of somebody, unless, you step outside.
Yeah, common courtesy.
Much less a room full of people. So there's that. And I'm trying to remember when I could even have seen this because I feel like it's one of my earliest type of red flags, but I feel like I shouldn't have seen it before marrying in. But I guess I did. I think I was invited to a family dinner or two.
You were around.
Especially like my first month there. It's like you said, you weren't having me over too much, but I think I was there like as a guest of honor, like for one Friday night family dinner, like my first week or two moving or something like that. But the harsh snapping at your mom, like, I'm sitting here, there should be ketchup and salt and pepper in front of me, my hot sauce, you should have known this. Like hey, why don't I have this type of a thing?
And then she gets up from the table to
that
get
servitude, that like, no question about it. I mean, because again, like that's not the way I'm seeing the Christ in the church, husband and wife modeled in my household as a child. Like that's not what I'm seeing. Like just common human instinct, like on loving, like that's not what you're, like that's so insanely like thousands of years old patriarchal, like maybe not even then, but you know what I mean? It's like a whole nother culture, like where that's acceptable, like not in America, not really. So those couple of things. And then some of the attitude, I guess, you would see from behind the lectern, not podium. Yeah, I would. The way I would describe it now is differently than how I would have kind of subconsciously experienced it then or told you then. But yeah, a level of harshness and just honestly that abusive type of tone from the lectern. The thing that like I marveled at this for years. Talked to Sarah about it all the time, like in the middle years of us being married, before we left, like several years ago, of like, how am I as terrified of your dad as you are, but I wasn't raised by him. Yeah. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. I was like, why am I deathly afraid of him and God, like being so mad at me over like, I didn't do anything. You know what I mean? It's just like, he just might look at you, or that's the sort of thing when you're talking about narcissism, right? And that personality is like walking into the room, you're basing how you feel, how comfortable you feel right now on them entering the room and being like, are they in a good mood or a bad mood today? And if they're in a bad mood, why? Like how am I that? And I wasn't raised by him, but I'm as scared as the Lasiter children. Probably can't quite compare it to there, but you know what I mean? Where it's like, but I was an incredibly conscientious kid, raised with this fear of God and this level of perfectionism and performance-based earning love and acceptance imprinted, not beat into me, but definitely imprinted. So like I'm a sponge for it, I guess, kind of like predisposed to it. So you put me around this guy and yeah, I guess I'm highly susceptible.
Well, Friday night dinners, we're all at the table getting around, getting ready. Some of us seated. We're all waiting to see what's Dad's mood tonight.
Oh yeah.
especially near the end where we're thinking like, okay, this is going to determine not only...
We're going into Friday night worship service
That's
in
exactly
30
right.
minutes.
This is going to determine how dinner goes and then the rest of the night for everyone else in the church.
Like, is
you
God
guys are
going to be
deal
pissed?
with
Is
it.
God going to be pissed at us tonight? Or are we like special and
Yes.
he loves us and we're doing great? Because how you feel heavily leans on that.
Yes.
Did it feel arbitrary? I mean, did it feel like you knew what the rules were?
No.
Or,
No. That's the thing is like, yes, it was arbitrary.
Yeah.
But then when you're feeling it, well, I don't know how it varies person to person, personality type to different type, because for me, I am so conscientious and worried about failing and beating yourself up all the time. So for me, no, it's not arbitrary. For me, it's like I legitimately have screwed up here. Like if God's mad right now, like to us as a group, to me individually, like where's it wrong? What do I need to do better? Like it wasn't how arbitrary is this? It's like, what does he know that I'm not even aware of yet?
Exactly.
Or about this secret sin
Yes.
that I can't kick. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yes.
Oh, that's a perfect way to put that.
what?
What does he know?
Oh yeah.
I think
that I'm
we've
not
all said
perceiving.
that.
He being your dad and God.
Yes.
It was one and the same.
If he's upset at you about something, well, it's something that I'm not seeing, but he's right.
My brother Logan was chatting with me 2 weeks ago and literally said that. And so he did not buy in, did not move, was not gonna, but visited a handful of times to come see me. Told me that he was sitting in the pews hearing your dad talk about, I see demons. And I see him right there in the eyes, and he's sitting there freaking out like, what does he see? Me, the demon in me. It's sad, right? But like we were all there experiencing it.
Wait, he said he saw a demon in your brother?
No.
No.
Your
Oh,
dad
sorry.
was talking about that, was the context of the sermon, how grand he was and how much demons recognized him and how much warfare he'd done with them and how he recognizes them. But like I could see him right there, like sitting in the pew.
Which
in
was the
somebody's
whole
eyes.
point of talking about it, right? It was
Probably.
still about the common thread that we always come back to is that
I'm special.
it was elevating himself. All of these stories had to do with that because the only reason the demons were there was because of his stature.
You know what's messed up about that is that's very true. But to a degree, he's bringing us along with him. Like we were, like there were demons assigned to our congregation.
Yeah,
like,
but he was leading the congregation.
he's here, but we were feeling good to be like a couple rings below him, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
under the
We
umbrella.
were feeling good about that and terrified of it. It's a blessing and a curse. Yeah, so it was arbitrary. You look back on it now, like once you realize what's going on and you're like, how the hell do you get by with this at your whim based on my emotions today is how I'm whipping all of you around. Like I'm angry at you, like I'm good, like for no good reason. Like you're having a bad day, so God's mad at all of us. I mean, who knows what happened? Like, why are you in a bad mood today? Like, and why is it all our fault? Like, it's so arbitrary. But like everything was riding on that. And that's not just for me. Like that's for so many other, like, and it would make you feel insane. Like I compared myself, especially once, I'm getting, intimately acquainted with Sarah's childhood, like, because I'm an inquisitive guy. I like to analyze things and figure them out. So she'll tell you, like, she never would have allowed herself to think things about your dad if not for me asking a lot of questions and for her feeling free scripturally with me as the husband to be like, well, I left dad's covering to husband's covering. Like, it's okay for me to share. Like, even though it feels deathly wrong
Right.
to talk bad about dad, you share with me. And so like, but it wasn't bad about him. It was just little clues
Experiences.
and it's evolving over a long time and me really wanting to figure stuff out. But I compared myself to the Lasiter kids. Like, I wasn't raised by him. Why am I terrified of him? He's literally never set me down and really taken my head off like he has a lot of people because I am following the rules pretty dang close. I'm never going to give you a reason to if I can help it. I did, but not really.
Where did the fear come from? Was it seeing him interact with other people or reprimanding, putting other people in their place? Or was it just his, like the verbiage he used? What was it?
I probably couldn't give you a great, accurate, specific answer on that because I think it's multifaceted. I think it's probably equal parts my epigenetics, predisposition, personality wise, how my parents are, being in worldwide, like just this fear of authority, like to this day, if a cop, I follow all the rules on the road. If a cop pulls behind me, I'm freaking out and driving 3 times as careful. He's going to pull me over at any moment for doing nothing. And it's happened. They pulled me over before and grilled me. Right.
It's a whole other episode though, when you do grow up feeling like you're very fearful of authority, all kinds of
authority
things
and failing
can happen to you.
Like, to answer that question, I mean, it's multifaceted, but terrified of authority. And I think some of that goes to, and I'm telling you, like, I love him and respect him, but like how worldwide and his dad, like, taught my dad, like, to parent me is like, you cannot backtalk authority. You cannot look like you disagree or have a self-pitying look. And you guys know that way worse than me, how your dad was. Like, I got a mild version of that, but it was strongly imprinted on me. Like, you respect authority, and respect means be terrified of in my psyche.
Absolutely.
It just does. Like, so to this day, it's embarrassing, but yeah, I'm too afraid of cops. Like, cops can be jerks if their power has gone to their head. Not all of them are, you know. We need policemen, so not disparaging, you know, civil servants, but yeah. So the epigenetic component, like, predisposed, like, emotionally or personality wise, to want to be perfect and perform well. And so to be in an environment where, yeah, you're not, and your head can get taken off like that, seeing it happen to other people, I'm just already very afraid. I'm already a very fearful person. I think that's how I see my parents, you know, as a kid, subconsciously, like, living their life, you know, similarly. And so that's the way I'm doing mine. Like, I see it in Elise now, right? She's scared of the lifeguard at the pool because we've told her you can't do such and such. The lifeguard's going to come get onto us. She thinks the lifeguard's this. It's not funny. Like, it's sad, but it is what it is. I don't know. I don't know how to, like, just stop the train all at once and be like, no, we got to point this in a different direction that I don't even know how to live for my life all the way yet. Right. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I'm just afraid of how he's conducting himself I'm watching what he's doing to Matt and Michael, you know, in their household. And I'm just like, dang.
Like, what was that like?
So there's a huge thing to your earlier question about, like, what are some of the red flags I'm seeing, is like, it was shocking to me. Because like I said, I mean, my dad raised me like in an authoritarian type of patriarchal, you know, biblical type of way worldwide. But he was kind and loving and not abusive. But like, seeing the verbal mistreatment, never physical, but verbal mistreatment of.
What was physical, but you didn't see the physical.
Right. No, I'm not denying that. I'm just saying what I'm witnessing, just hanging out in the household, like, you did this thing I told you to do, but you screwed it up, or you didn't do this thing I told you to do, or you haven't done it right now, or I'm not going to get up and do it myself. I want it done right now. Like how he was treating Matt and Michael about getting stuff done, and just harsh and belittling and demanding. Like, it was just like, my dad was going to lead by example, right? Like, I mean, where's a church function and we're setting up a tent, you know, for evangelism, which wasn't happening in the church we were, but something like that, right? Like, my dad is out there, he's never resting, like never taking a break, like he's doing the work. It was really weird for me to see your dad, like, never lift a finger. It's like everyone else is going to do a bunch of work and I'm going to sweep in and, like, stuff's going all right.
He'll show up when it's done.
And then, like, have, the glory, whatever, like the stage, but standing on other people's shoulders, like doing the leg work, like that was, but we chalked it up to, like, I can remember it being said, like, well, he has all of this weight, like the Apostle Paul of all the churches, well-being resting on his conscience and the prayer and the spiritual weight and preparing the messages. So of course he's not stepping up to do that. But I'm just saying, like, that was weird for me to see. Yeah. Like, and you had to rationalize that was okay.
And not that you sparked a memory, not to go on a tangent about this, but thinking back to it was Camelot, but for people who are listening,
I still call it Camelot.
Yeah.
I never called it the Evening in the Court of King Jesus.
But essentially, I mean, I was there when it started in 2004 or 5, whatever it was. It was a medieval like dress up party, but over the years,
Before Sarah
it
said,
morphed.
like it was her luau thing at a feast
Yes.
before that, and the luau became
Yeah, we were just like, well, we'll do a different theme, and it
Medieval
morphed
stuck.
over the years. But point being, it got to the point where, and Sarah was the one that was like doing the majority of this, and she had people who helped.
John all night long till 4
Yeah,
a.m.
and
Like didn't
Tammy
sleep.
and like the people
Yeah.
that are just like we didn't have services that day during the feast because that was the night we were going to have our night in the Court of King Jesus celebration, and people dress up and there's food and there's this whole
Banquet and-
production, and like these people were killing themselves year after year, making it bigger and better, and it was beautiful. Like they did an amazing job, and then Dad would breeze in, and then we all, depending on how Dad is reacting to just
Were
his
we somber
day,
or joyous?
yeah, we would just
Yep.
react to how he was, and that's how the night was going to be. But it was just like that's exactly like Dad just comes in like he's off, I don't know doing what, which he doesn't have to, but that's a good illustration.
Yeah.
Like he demands that this be this way
Perfect.
and to be perfect and awesome and amazing, and he has nothing to do with it except for
And he will come
taking
in
the
and take your
glory.
head off for
yeah.
messing any part of it up.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Not mine. That didn't happen to me, but like you or Sarah or Michael, like, yeah.
PTSD from that stuff for sure.
I've got it by proxy.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, but I do.
Yeah.
Well, you don't, and nobody wants to see someone else, especially that you're close to,
No.
get. I mean, that is a factor where you're like, even Sandy has talked about that. Like, he didn't experience that with Dad, but he saw me experience that with Dad, and it, like,
Yeah.
he's got trauma from that.
I know.
Because
Well, that's one of the things that I forgot to say earlier, but I was saying how I compared myself to you guys who were raised by him, and it didn't make sense to me. But then Sandy comes along and he's a little bit more vocal about what he's experiencing. I'm like, okay, so he also was terrified of this guy that didn't raise him. Like, what's going on here, you know?
Yeah, completely different background,
Because
too.
he makes
like,
it funny.
Yeah.
To me, it's not funny the way I
Yeah.
think about it, but you listen to him talk about it, it's hilarious. I can't remember some of his one-liners about it now, but they're good stuff.
So once, the new had kind of worn off for you and you were in and established, maybe talk a little bit about just the general atmosphere once, you had been here for a minute. What was that? What did you perceive that to be like?
Yeah, I guess like with everything, it's a little multifaceted, right? You're still swept up in the cult mindset of how special we all are, and so there's an element of pride there, right? And like this exclusivity as a group, which is so funny. You think about Russellville, Arkansas, and like our massive website. Massive was always the word for the website.
State of the art, massive.
It's not state of the art. There's no search function. You can't find anything on there that you want, if you wanted. But so like that's a big pervading part of it, right? Like when I look back on it now, and you're removed enough and deconstructing or reconstructing, and through all that, the pharisaical, like overall tone, like of legalism and the pure pride at the heart of it, along with a lot of self-abasement and like beating yourself up all of the time, right? Like, so talk about the environment, because this isn't unique to me. I think this is fairly widespread and probably varies a little personality type, but it's kind of tormenting mentally what you go through, thinking all of the time about, are you doing enough? Are you good enough? Are you like, you can't be perfect, right? But you darn well want to be pretty close is the goal. And rationally, like, you're not supposed to earn God's love, right? But somehow that's deep down, like that's the way you're operating, or your dad's love, or it's one and the same, you know what I mean? Or like for me, he wasn't my dad, but like this leader's opinion of me, like, is what it all hangs on. And rationally, like, that's wrong. Like, you know, that's not supposed to be that way. But it is the way that you're acting. And everybody's acting. Like, I think most people you talk to, anybody's going to tell you, like, you're afraid if the sermon starts sounding like it's about you, you know? And so, like, that is, like, it's, the environment is one of a lot of, it's different things. Like, it's this exclusivity and pride and, like, you're safe being a part of this group. Like, this is where it is to be. But then a lot of fear that you're personally dropping the ball, or that this week as a group, the sermon is a beating instead of y'all are great. You know, it's like, you love it when the topics or mood is shifting from we've been screwing up and letting the Lord down pretty bad and haven't pursued his presence. You haven't prayed Friday night enough out loud, or, you know, we haven't seen miracles happen in years. It used to be they happened a lot, you know, and I never saw those, most of them. But and when that mood shifts and the sermon series starts to sound more like, we're so special, like God loves you so much, and we're the most unique, and like all of that. What's the term for
love bombing?
Yeah, there you go. That's the term. That's not what I was looking for, but affirmations type of thing, you know, like when the sermons feel like that, like, or he's happy and funny and telling stories, like, so the mood, like the atmosphere, that all depends on what your dad's mood was, right? The atmosphere is either happy and jovial, or y'all better watch out. Mm-hmm. And like, that's kind of how I remember that. And you get into a little bit more nuance past that, then socially, you guys will probably delve into this a lot more on just cult informationally, but like socially, it's a whole nother ball game. Like how this group is interacting and functioning as a unit. Like, because I was raised where, just for instance, like gossip was a no-no. Like, you do not speak negatively of anyone else, or negatively in general, right? Like, right. Hey, you don't say something that, you know, feels bad, or I'm struggling with this, or I'm sick. It's like, no, like, I'm healed. Or like, if you have something negative to say about someone else, like, that's gossip. And so it was really hard for me to, I remember integrating into the everyone is in every aspect of your business scenario, which I still resent that to this day. Now I participated in it, you know, like you get swept up in the group dynamic, and you're feeling good when someone else is the one that's screwed up and being talked about and being shunned, because that's happening. Like, you're being shunned, iced out, cold shoulder. Like, if you've messed up, if you're not committed fully enough, if you're, what would you say in one of your last episodes, like a full-time visitor or something, like you're not all the way in. You know, like, you can think of any number of people or families that, like, they're attending a lot, but they're on the fringe. But the people on the fringe are like, are they oblivious to it? Maybe sometimes, but probably not all the time. Like, they're really, people had thrown around the term cliquish, right? Mm-hmm. And we were always resentful, like, we're not cliques, you know, that's not happening. It was happening. Oh yeah. 100% It was happening a lot. And there was cliques within cliques, right? The church as a whole is a clique, and then there's the outer circle that's kind of outcast and they're going to be made fun of. And then there's the inner circle, then the really inner circle, then there's the Lasiters, right? So you name what ring you're on, and there's some cross. It was like that, right? Well,
and like, I think what you're in part describing is like,
and not to say the Lasiters had it all great. No, like the inner clique is the worst.
But it was like the power and authority by proxy dynamic that was going on, to where it wasn't just Dad's the one.
It's an umbrella. It's like a Ponzi scheme. Yeah, is what it is.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's a pyramid.
Type,
there
you go.
Type version of this. You know,
that is what it was like. And
you're exerting your power and authority that's flowing down on the people that you view beneath you.
It's God's,
in
right?
some way. Yeah,
it's God's authority, but He's giving it to your dad, and then He's giving it to a couple elders. He's giving it to here and here, and like the family,
and those people, and myself included. I mean, I when we talked to Sandy, like, I put myself in a position of some kind of authority in Sandy's life, and I think we all did that some more than others, where you just like, you take hold of that and say like, well, I have like the God-given authority to tell you what to do.
Well, it's been done to you,
person.
right? Like somebody snatched you up, called you up, and then it kind of feels, you're not really thinking of it this way, but it kind of feels good to be able to be over somebody else a little, like it spares you a little, like it.
And maybe validating in some weird way.
Oh, it's definitely validating. Yeah, like I'm X level of maturity or X level on the totem pole, like you're put on the speaking list, like, okay, that feels like, all right, I'm spiritually put together now, and like it sucks. Like public speaking is terrible.
We did not want that.
You didn't want it.
The byproduct was
part of you
honor,
does.
though.
Part of you does. What?
It was an honor, right?
It was, yes. Like part of you hates it, like it's terrible and nerve wracking, and you don't want to be in front of people. But the other part of you is like, yeah, this feels like you've attained X level of credibility and respect, right? So that feels good. While it's being preached that, oh, no member, this little finger is it's better than every other. Like it's its own little finger, right? Like every body part is unique, and like you need them all. But there's more honor to whatever. Anyway, but the point is socially, that cult dynamic of, and you all participate in it. Like everyone feels better when you're more on the inside and less on the outside, and you're the one getting whispered to about so and so, and just like honestly, gossip aside, for lack of a better term, whatever you want to call it, the level of in your face in everyone's business, everyone is still insane to me to this day. Like knowing that you're supposed to be counseling privately with the pastor, and everyone is going to know what gets said, or take that anywhere step but down to the totem pole,
And it was a point of pride that we were in each other's business the way that we were.
We bragged about it.
Oh yeah.
He did from the lectern to visitors. I mean,
like
maybe
in what
not.
way?
Yeah. Like how did that go? It was like, we care, we hold each other accountable. You are your brother's keeper.
Ugh.
Right. And
that's the justification for knowing everything that somebody's doing in their personal life.
And to knowing having any personal autonomy.
Yes. Yeah.
Like that.
Like you're accountable to.
Accountable's an understatement,
everybody.
Right? It's like you're controlled.
Yeah.
Accountable's a nice way of putting it. Like really, that every aspect of your. That's not entirely true, right? It's not like every aspect of your life is controlled, but to a large extent,
subject to control.
Subject. Yep. There you go.
That's a good way of putting it. Not that it was actively controlled, but it's subject to. Right. I think we had talked about that in another episode. Like you could do things and get a job.
Oh, there's a red flag for you.
But if someone in authority were to tell you you can't have that job, then you're not going to have that job.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like it's not that you can't do things, but it's subject to change.
You know it.
Well, they come with consequences.
And the comment of you can do whatever you want to do.
Ooh.
Every time I ever heard that in my head, I'm like, well, that's bull.
Yeah.
Everyone here knows it.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm just your pastor if you want me to be your pastor. It's like, no. You're sitting here like you cannot do whatever you want to do. If you do, there will be grave consequences.
That was just gaslighting.
It's ridiculous. Like to put this facade on it when everyone knows it's a lie.
Yeah.
Like no one believes that you can do whatever you want to do, unless you're just like a way outsider and you are doing whatever you want to do. But then he's like, well, I'm not their pastor.
Well, then you'll be completely ostracized and pushed 100%. Out, which we've seen.
It happened to everybody.
Like I took part in that.
Yep.
Like people who weren't.
We all did.
In the fold to the degree that we thought they should be somehow, or not buying in, you're going to be pushed right on out, like a splinter.
You're not on fire. You're not hot enough. Like the Lord hates lukewarm. Like you know what I mean? It's like you, how would your dad put it? It was like you either want, like you're passionate, like pursuing the fire, or you're cold and like you're on the outs. Like you just are. I can't remember how it was put now, but yeah, that was talked about a lot. Like how everyone left him. Like you leave Worldwide, and what was the next one? Living or whatever, what offshoot, and then forming your own thing, and everyone but Earlene left. Right? It's like no one could stand the heat. Was kind of the thing. It's like we're pressing on, we're pursuing, and
Again, it goes back to the reason you leave is a deficiency in you.
Yep.
Nothing that's happening.
Nope.
You're the reason you left.
Well, now I look back on it, I'm like, how many people should you go back and apologize to for just treating them like crap? You know, like even just whether you said it out loud or you just complicit, like part, like, I mean, you name your level, the flavor of it, but that left because they saw what we now see and had the guts to leave when we were, I don't know. But yeah, the environment, the temperature there, I mean, there's so much of it that is supposed to be good. Like we're built for connection and community, you know? So like when that Liz's, one of her big draws is like belonging, like this community. Like for me, that's huge. Like I'm a social person. Like I'm kind of an extrovert. And so fulfilling that need, like we're supposed to be connected, you know, we need one another. So like to one degree, like that was a good thing. And you form like, you know, meaningful friendships and closeness and this bond, and you are having a good time, you know, with your friends. To a large extent, like church events and functions, depends on who you are, right? But they were a good time. But on the flip side, you know, you take something to an extreme and like you run through the bite model about just the control that exists behavior wise and information wise and thought wise. And what's the E? Emotion. All of it checks all the boxes, like just how extreme it was. And so like this thing that's supposed to be good that you can see a lot of positive in, or like now it's like there's so much loss associated with having left it all. Like friendship loss and community, like take all of the theology and like who you are, like all of that off the table, just relationally. There's a lot of sadness and loss there for me. It's really hard to work through. That like literally hit me like a ton of bricks setting foot in Arkansas this weekend for the first time in 2 years. And the foliage is different and the smell of fall, like it smells like the feast. You know, and like there's so many good memories there that now are just painful because it's good and bad, and then the good is all gone. It feels like, you know what I mean? So ultimately, I mean, you can see the positive in some of that stuff, the community, but then it was dysfunctional and painful and tumultuous and ultimately just not healthy, right?
If you like this episode of The Cult Next Door, please leave us a positive review and rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And don't forget to subscribe to be notified of new episodes.